let's get to the other game on Super Wildcard Weekend out in Tampa. And we'll start with the Eagles, Brady, a team that first 11 games of the season, Super Bowl betting favorite, near the top, if not the top of Pete Prisco's power rankings here, but they've fallen on a huge slide, just one of two teams to go 10-1 in their first 11 games and then end up with 5 or more losses here. So I know it's a short time frame to try to fix things for Philly, and there are a great many things to deal with, but what are your thoughts here with them coming into this game?
Look, if you're their head coach, Nick Serianni, you are preaching to your team it's a new season, and that's how every team that gets in the playoffs tries to approach it. You're in a one-game win-or-go-home scenario, and you can flip on this switch right now. So forget about losing 5 of our last 6. Forget about what's taken place during the course of the regular season, what our rankings was, this and that. You're convincing your team of that, and that you were a team that last year found a way of navigating itself to a Super Bowl, and that's what you're going to do again today, and it starts in Tampa. Now, easier said than done, because you've got a quarterback who's banged up his throwing hand, right? His middle finger was impacted in the game last week. You don't have A.J. Brown at wide receiver. Devontae Smith was banged up, although he's going to play in this one. And your ground game hasn't been as dominant. So it's tough, and especially when you look at the matchup versus Baker Mayfield. Granted, he's banged up, Pete, but their secondary struggled in Philly, and I know they get Slay back today. That should help, but they haven't been able to pressure quite the same either. So I look at this one and think, yes, Philly can get back to what they do and get on a run, but it's going to take them running the football, Hurts making some big plays down the field with what they've got offensively on offense, and he's probably going to have to be a part of that running game as well.
They were a violent, physical, nasty team last year on both lines. The offensive line was dominant. The defensive line got after the quarterback, other than the Super Bowl when they had feet problems because it was slippery. Remember that? But they haven't done that this year at all. They haven't been a great running team. There's been criticism about getting away from the run too much with that offense. I think they need to get back to what they were, and that becomes running the ball, physical on the offensive side of the ball, and attacking the quarterback. We saw a couple weeks ago when Tampa Bay played the New Orleans Saints in Tampa, New Orleans just brutalized Baker Mayfield. They dominated up front. So if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you think you can be what you were a year ago, this is the game to try and get that thing going, because they can have a mismatch with the offensive line, and I think on the other side of the ball they can get after the quarterback.
And to your point, I mean, look, this is not a Tampa Bay Bucs team that wants to run the football. They're dead last in the league during the course of the regular season. So unless they showcase a willingness and the ability to do so, you put all the pressure you can on loading up to pressure Baker Mayfield, see how healthy he is with that banged up ankle, as well as dealing with rib injuries, and see if you can hold up on the outside versus Godwin and Mike Evans. That's the tough part.
See, that's the problem.
That's where you could end up getting burnt.
They haven't rushed the passer very well in the last 7 weeks of the season, and that's a major concern, because if they don't, those two guys are going to go off down the field. They will if they cannot get pressure.
We're taking a look at most points per game allowed in the regular season by an eventual Super Bowl winner. Again, the Eagles, to all the things that you're talking about. Also, where's DeAndre Swift been? Was a monster the first 10, 11 weeks of the season, and except for maybe one game down the stretch. And again, it's resulted in the wins and losses there. Before we move on to the Tampa here, though, much like we talk about some of the other head coaches under pressure, Pete, Nick Serianni, what's the mindset you think for him coming into this game? Can he just coach it as it is and not worry about the outcome?
So if he loses, he's in trouble. I don't think he's going to get fired, but you never know. This league has no patience anymore. It's gone. Any shred of patience that the league had is now over with and done with. So can you go from a Super Bowl 1 January to being fired the following one? That would be crazy. That would be absolutely crazy. But you hear the rumblings that there's some people that think that this thing has gotten off the rails a little bit, and he needs to rein it back in, or else he might be in trouble.
It'd be crazy to think that, considering the track record, right? They go to the playoffs, overachieve year 1, they get to the Super Bowl in year 2, and then meanwhile they're still winning a bunch of games despite how they finished, and in the playoffs once again, and they could be one and done, and all of a sudden he's gone. Look, what they've struggled with is the fact that you've got a first-time offensive play caller in Brian Johnson. That's difficult to do at the NFL level in your first year, to define your identity and how you go about pairing what you'd like to do with the talent you have. That's the first thing. The second thing is you lost a great defensive coordinator in Jonathan Gannon, and I don't know that Sean Desai, I don't know that Matt Patricia have been able to fill that void either. And it's probably somewhat to do with schematically what they're doing, but also the injuries that they've sustained as well. And I think we underrated how important both those two figures were. Shane Steichen on offense, Jonathan Gannon on defense. You're now seeing some of that reveal itself. I think that's why offensively you don't feel like they can find any flow. Defensively, you can't seem to make adjustments to overcome the fact that they're not getting pressure at the front four, they're not covering as well on the outside. All of those things have added up. So I would rather this organization, if they do lose today, take a look in the mirror and say, all right, what do we need to change? How do we need to adapt to get better? But changing the head coach isn't going to fix that. And I don't know that you're changing coordinators is either. I think if those guys got to continue to grow in each side of the football and get better heading into 2024.
I would make the change. I mean, he's done enough to earn at least another year in my book. I would not make that change. Here's the other thing. The Super Bowl hangover is real in the NFL. When you lose a Super Bowl, if you go back and look, it's real. It's hard to navigate being a targeted team and the loss in that Super Bowl. It's hard to handle that. Some teams do it. They get back, they play better, they still don't get back to the Super Bowl. This team has not done a good job of navigating that at all this year.
And despite all that, they are favorites on the road on a hot Bucs team, though. Brady Quinn coming in despite that loss at home to the Saints, coming in with some form and then having a chance with their quarterback Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take the 2.5 points here. It was at 3 points earlier in the week. I like Tampa Bay then as well. I just think when you look at how these two teams match up, the front seven for Tampa Bay does a good job stopping the run. If that's what Philly's going to try to get back to, it's going to be a tough task. And the question is whether or not Jalen Hurts, with the banged-up middle finger, especially without A.J. Brown, can exploit the secondary for the Bucs, which has struggled this year. But this defense is also back healthy, Pete. And then the flip side, if you look at the weakness, like Baker Mayfield to the outside and all that, throwing on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, all those guys, they've been able to make hay that way, and I think that's a weakness for the Eagles. So I'll gladly take the 2.5 points here.
The one thing that the Bucs had problems with was really busting a lot of coverages, blown coverages, and they've been better at it lately. And part of that is because a guy like Yaya Diaby's starting to rush the passer and become more of a factor up front. When you rush the passer, it covers up your liabilities on the back end. So I do think that they'll be able to get after the quarterback if they can stop the run. They have to be able to stop the run. You know, the Eagles run the ball because it makes you defend. When Jalen Hurts is a big part of the run game, it makes you defend him differently. If the run game's not working, then it's easier to defend Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. And it makes it much more difficult to continually move the football if you're the Eagles. So they have to get back to running the football. If they don't, I think they could have a problem with that pass rush at Tampa Bay.
And you also don't have A.J. Brown to worry about as well. Like, when you've got Devontae Smith on one side, A.J. Brown on the other side, you're going to make a decision as a coordinator because you don't want to expose your secondary to being one-on-one coverage all the time. Either one of those guys can hit you for a home run in a heartbeat. So not only is it the concern about is Jalen Hurts a part of that rushing attack and how you end up, doing the box count and how you're going to end up blocking and handling the quarterback run game, but then it's also the special playmakers on the outside. So, not having A.J. Brown, that makes it a little bit more difficult. And then if you don't allow Hurts to be part of that attack too, it takes away from some of the bite, I think, of the Eagles offense.
And they know that Julio Jones isn't going to run by you. He was there with them last year. They know that all too well. Hey, you don't have to worry about him going by you.
Bucs fans are hoping to repeat of Saturday where the division winner was a home dog to the 5 seed and the Texans took care of the Browns, and we'll see if it plays out the same out in Tampa with Eagles and Bucs. Pick 6 podcast, scan the QR code. Katie Box, Will Brinson, the Super Friends, both Pete and Brady, regular guests on the Pick 6 podcast, so check them out if you haven't already today.